Good morning, sixth graders. Before we continue with Lamb to the Slaughter, let's answer a few pre-reading questions. First, make sure that you know the climax is the most intense, emotional, big action in the story. So today we are going to read the climax of Lamb to the Slaughter, and then you are going to write your own in your ancient Sumer narrative. Make sure you have this written down. All right, but first, on yesterday's exit ticket, there was a question that said, what do you predict will happen in the climax of Lamb to the Slaughter? But why is this example right below not a strong answer to that question? If someone said, I predict that the wife will feel sad because her husband said that he wants to leave her. Why is that not a good prediction about what will happen in the climax? Jot down your answer right here. Okay, that is not a strong prediction because a climax has to be intense, really emotional, and a big action. Sure, this talks about emotions, but if your climax is just our author telling us that the wife is sad, that's not a climax. So make sure that as we read the climax today, you realize that it's always a big action happening. Remember where we had left off? We know that he told her some big news. We can basically infer that he said he wants to divorce her, but we also know Mary is very in love with him. So let's keep going and take a look at what happens next in the climax. At that point, Mary Maloney simply walked up behind him, and without any pause, she swung the big frozen leg of lamb high in the air and brought it down as hard as she could on the back of his head. She might as well have hit him with a steel bar. She heard the clunk of it, the bang of it against his head, and knew what the results would be. She had pulled her arm back with such force as though she were winding up to throw a baseball across a 100-meter field. Mary suddenly realized that the lamb in her hands felt incredibly slippery. What for something so raw and frozen? Probably because I'm dripping sweat, she thought, shaking as she held the lamb. She then stepped back, waiting. And the strange thing was that he remained standing there for at least 4 or 5 seconds. Then he crashed onto the carpet. The violence of the crash, the noise, the small table overturning, helped to bring her out of the shock. She came out slowly, feeling cold and surprised, and she stood for a few minutes looking at the body, still holding the piece of meat tightly with both hands. She stared down the open, empty, white eyes that lay on the floor before her. All right, she told herself, so I've killed him. All right, so remind me, what makes something a really strong climax? Jot down right here, what does a strong climax need to have? Okay, welcome back. So make sure that you have written down the same thing as we put before. It has to be intense, has to be emotional, and it has to be a big action. So Roald Dahl definitely made sure that these things all happen in his climax. Underline places in the climax where Roald Dahl does that well. So for this, you don't have to have anything written, but go through your text and underline any place where he definitely does that. Okay, and now make sure that you have those underlines in. If you don't, then pause and unpause once you're done. Okay, now number 3, in quotation marks, copy down the moment where an action occurred that made you feel the most intense emotion. So as you were reading this, was there a certain moment where you thought, oh my goodness, this is really intense right now? Oh my gosh, you kind of felt that emotion in yourself? Go ahead and make sure that you find that, copy it down inside quotation marks. Okay, so now let's start thinking, what major emotional event is going to take place in your climax? So here, Mary kills her husband with a lamb shank. Jot down right here what's going to happen in your climax. Awesome. So now that you have taken a look at what a really strong climax looks like, it's emotional, it's intense, there's action, go ahead and write yours for your story. Make sure you start new paragraphs and indent each paragraph.